Hey, everybody. A little bit different twist in this week's leadership devotion for law enforcement. As most of you know, I love athletics. And today it's my DBAT hat, which my son is the proud owner of DBAT, and God has truly blessed him. But having to work with professional athletes uh, and have friendships with professional athletes, it was a part of my life very early on, and even into my early to mid 30s, early 40s. I was still involved with working with some professional athletes that were great Christians, but I think not only were they great Christians, they were phenomenal leaders, not only players in the NBA, but coaches in the NBA, now college coaches. Um, and yet having a son who also played professional baseball, who is a very successful business owner. I thought with the World, not the World Series, but the All Star Game, obviously that just got concluded. Um, I thought it'd be a good time just to kind of change up and look at leadership from an athletic perspective. And a lot of times what we learn in athletics, for those of you that were athletes, and even those that you weren't athletes, there were things that we learned along the line as athletes that were really leadership principles. Talked in one devotion about, obviously, Coach John Wooden, who was an incredible mentor to many of his athletes. But, there were coaches that I came up with in high school and college and after college, traveling around the world, playing the game that I love to play, that had a tremendous influence on the leadership qualities that I took into the field of law enforcement or took into the field of ministry or education. Was very blessed to have done all of those things. And so kind of want to give you a perspective as kind of an athlete, what things I took into my leadership roles as a chief of police and into the schools that I was the CEO and administrator of, and with what we do with the ministry and what we do with our training company. I thought I would give you something from Scripture today that talks about athletics and the leadership things as far as athletics are concerned, and I want to try to give it to you. This is actually one of my favorite Bible verses too. It's found 1 Corinthians chapter 9, verses 24 through 27 says this: Do you not know that those who run in a race, they all run, but only one receives the prize? Run in such a way that you may obtain it. And everyone who competes for the prize is temperate in all things. Now they do it to obtain a perishable crown, but we do it for an imperishable crown. Therefore, I do not run like this. I don't run with uncertainty. I don't fight like a man who beats the air, but I discipline my body and bring it into subjection, lest when I have preached to others, I myself should not be disqualified. And the interesting part about that is, as an athlete, we were training ourselves all of the time to be in better shape, run faster, jump higher, shoot better, guard better. We were doing a lot of different things to try to make us the very best athlete that we could be. The interesting part about that was no matter where I competed in athletics, I was always about trying to give my testimony to the people that I was playing in front of, or the people that I was playing with, my teammates, so to speak. And it's those disciplines and the things that I learned in athletics, disciplining myself to be in better shape, to run faster, be quicker, jump higher, shoot better, guard better, and do the things in basketball that I love to do. And, obviously those of you that follow me on the YouTube channel, you can go back several different years and see a video when I was with in the early or the late 90s when I was at the Chicago Bulls facility, and somebody happened to grab a camera while I was warming up, getting ready to go work out one of the players that I was working with in the NBA at the time. But it's those things that I learned as a young man growing up. One was never, ever quit. And there were times where, man, I thought this was too tough. I thought it would be too hard. I was not a tall individual, and for the game of basketball, everybody knows that that's a very tall man's sport. I was 5'8" with a 46-inch vertical. I could dunk a basketball any way I wanted to, and I learned how to shoot and I became quick and I got better at what I did. All because as a leader, I wanted to challenge myself to be the very best that I could be. And this is what Paul is saying. Paul says, listen, in a race, everybody's going to run. And everybody out there is trying to win. That's the goal. And he says this, run in such a way as to win. I don't go out there and compete as an athlete, or now even as a leader in law enforcement, to lose. I go out with the mentality is I'm going to win. Now, does it mean that I'm going to win every time? No, it doesn't. I'm going to have losses. I'm going to lose some games. And sometimes the losses of those games could be because I didn't do something that I was supposed to do, that I was trained to do. Sometimes the losses can come from other people that they didn't do what they were trained to do at the same time. But Paul says, run that race in order to win. Listen, you as a leader, when you are put into that position as a leader, whether or not you are the chief of police, whether or not you are in leadership and somewhere in law enforcement, whether or not you own your own business and you are the leader, or you're somewhere in management, you are a leader. And if you're a Christian, Paul is admonishing those that were in Corinth and the Corinthians at the time, listen, go out and do this and go out and win. And he says a few things that really help us get to the mindset of winning. And again, if we lose, we don't just go in the corner and sulk. If we lose, we learn something. We go back and train so that the next time we can win. I would hope and pray that as a leader, you've got a lot more wins in your column than you've got losses. But the thing is if you've got more wins in your column, then I hope that your losses were the training ground to make you better as a leader. And he says several different things that I want to look at again. He says, therefore, I don't run without uncertainty. Another says, I don't just run aimlessly. In other words, if I'm in a race and I'm going around the track, I just don't run anywhere that I want to run. I have to follow the track, follow in my lane, depending on the race that I'm in, and I have to compete by those rules. I just don't go out there and run like, okay, I just feel like running today. Not gonna. He calls it aimlessly. In other words, I got no direction on where I'm going if I'm going to try to win this race. And he says, so most people who win go out and they run the race very specific. They train for it, and they know the rules to compete with to get them to win the race. They just don't go out and show up and go, okay, well, it's just another day, and I'm just going to run and go have fun. He's talking about competitive greatness here. And that's one of the things. I don't fight like a man who beats the air. In boxing, it was funny because I had the opportunity to travel with a guy by the name of Ernie Shavers. Ernie Shavers, I don't know if he still holds it, but Ernie Shavers held the record in professional boxing for the most knockouts. And I think it was something like 78. And I got to travel with him and a guy by the name of Joe Jackson, who played for the Minnesota Vikings and New York Jets. And we would go speak to students all across America using our athletic background to speak to them about the choices in getting good educations. But one of the things that taught me was Ernie shared this story about a guy who was a boxer. And he had come into the office at a group called Athletes International Ministries. And the guy was a boxer, and he walked in and he introduced himself. And he began to what they call shadow box. And shadow box is basically you're kind of going and you're faking punches at the person, but you're not hitting them. And so he starts to do this with Ernie, and Ernie puts his hands up and just drills him right in the nose. And the guy was shocked. I mean, bloody nose and stuff like that. And he goes, I don't shadow box. If you come asking for a fight, I'm going to take it to you. And don't pull your punches. And so that's kind of what Paul was saying here. I just don't go around flailing my arms like I'm going to fake fighting somebody. Listen, if I'm going to go into training as a boxer, I'm going to punch the bags, hit the speed bag. I'm going to get in the ring. I'm going to box, and I'm going to do the things that I need to do to make me successful. And that's what Paul's talking about. Just don't get in there and just flail your arms. Much like what he said, if you're going to run the race, don't just run around like a crazy man, and don't just step in the boxing ring like an idiot either. In other words, if you're going to do it, train the right way so that when he said this, when you've preached to others, the whole goal of when I was an athlete was how could I use my athleticism and what the talents and gifts that God had given me athletically to influence the lives of people around me for the gospel of Christ. I have lost count of the hundreds and hundreds, if not thousands of times that after I competed as an athlete, I got to talk to somebody about my relationship with the Lord, or I got to speak in a church about my athletic endeavors. Now that I'm in leadership positions in law enforcement, I use this same scripture. In leadership, after I have ministered to other people, I'm there because it says that promotion comes from above. And God places you in those positions. And I just don't sit in that position aimlessly and think like, okay, well, today's just another day. We're just going to go through the motions. The goal is when I'm a leader as a chief of police, or if I'm a leader in the businesses that I have, there are specific things and purposes that I try to do to make it successful, to make it to make sure that the money is coming in, to make sure that the business is viable, but to make sure that those people that I come in contact with understand that there's a principle for why I do what I do as a chief, or what I do as a business owner in my training corporation, or even what I do in law enforcement leadership ministries. There's a purpose for life. Simon Sinek calls it this: know the why. Why are you doing what you're doing? And Paul says, just like in athletics, you run that race in life, no matter what it is. He looks at it from an athletic perspective. But in the race, run in such a way as to win. And once you get there, whether you win or you lose, after you've preached to others, you're not disqualified. In other words, God's going to put you in front of the people that need to hear what you have to say. Now, once you get done ministering to those people, or preaching to those people, or being an example of what Christ was to those people, then they have the choice after that. If you're obedient to do that, then God can open up the door for those people to be saved. That's the whole goal of the giftedness and the talents that God gives you. And I tried to do that in everything I did as an athlete, as a chief of police, as a school administrator, as a college professor. Everything that I try to do is, no matter who's around me in any one of those professions, my goal is to influence them in a Christian lifestyle so that their eternity means something to them, rather than just going through life aimlessly, not knowing where they're going to go, hoping that if they do all of the right things, they're going to get to heaven, because we know that just doing the right things doesn't get you into heaven. Having a relationship with Jesus Christ is what gets you into heaven. And so you might be in a position where God has put you, not only maybe athletically, maybe he's put you in a position as a chief of police or a school administrator or a professor, or he's called you to a business. For me, it was athletics for a long period of my life. Still have tremendous friends that play in Major League Baseball. No more in the NBA, but are now influencing thousands of athletes with their success, knowing that once they've preached to others that was under their leadership abilities, that they made an influence in their lives. So I want to give you that today just as a reference, because in watching, obviously, the All-Star Game, I love baseball. I pray for the guys that I know in Major League Baseball that are Christians, that are always out there doing the things that they need to do, using their talent and their giftedness. They have been gifted to be in Major League Baseball, but they use it for the glory of God. And as Paul says, you know what? Run the race to win. Sometimes I get words, I get talking so fast that those things are. But you know what? God gives us the abilities to be athletes. And so I want to admonish you, those of you that are athletes that might be listening to this as well. God bless you guys. Stay safe. But if you're a leader out there, I want you to think about it in such a way. Run your leadership race to win, so that after you have preached the message of Christ to others, you're not going to be disqualified for the prize, which is our eternal salvation in heaven with him. God bless you. Have a great week.